So my hypothesis here, ladies and gentlemen, is that banter is an essential part of being British, and it's something that we are potentially losing. I love the fact that here in the UK we show our love for each other by insulting each other and saying inappropriate things sometimes. Now, obviously, there is a line. Obviously, there are times where it isn't appropriate, but I do think that there is words of wisdom. There are words of wisdom from this judge that say that perhaps we're becoming a little bit hypersensitive to all this sort of stuff. Well, Kate Welch is a freelance journalist and broadcaster. Marc Glendening is head of cultural affairs at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Both join me live here on Talk Radio. Afternoon to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us here on Talk Radio. So, question to you both. I'll start with you, Kate. Are we losing our ability here in the UK to banter?
I don't think we are at all. I think there's more of a sense of when it's appropriate and when it's not, the things you can and can't say. That's not about banter, that's about basic politeness. But I think what the term really means is our irreverence, our kind of playfulness that doesn't have to correlate with rudeness and making inappropriate personal comments.
I mean, banter, the dictionary definition of banter is the playful and friendly exchange of teasing remarks. And I think maybe teasing is a better way of putting it, but I don't know, how important, Marc, is teasing to our culture? And are we entering a period, or have we entered, I should probably say, a period of hypersensitivity around these things?
Yeah, I think we're entering actually something rather more sinister. You're absolutely right. It is part of our culture, and it has always been so, kind of a robust Hogarthian give and take. But actually what we're seeing now is a sinister new left wokey movement which is trying to colonize the culture and to dictate the way in which people culturally interact in terms of what they say to each other casually as well as politically. And this is a kind of authoritarian, highly illiberal, very non-British ideological campaign that's being waged. And so that's why this result in court, it was such a great victory for freedom of speech and common sense with regards to the lawyer who lost her case.
I mean, Kate, is there truth in that?
It's absolute nonsense. I'm sorry, but it really is. This is nothing to do with authoritarianism or censorship. It's simply about acknowledging that there are appropriate times and appropriate places to banter, to be lighthearted, to tease each other, and places where it's not. And I'd say the workplace certainly isn't.
But you're saying people shouldn't be free to have a casual exchange of views within the workplace? I think people should be free
to not be insulted in the workplace.
Who's going to police this?
I think people should be free to not be insulted in the workplace. And if that happens, then that needs to be discussed, that needs to be called out.
But if the intent isn't to insult, then
it doesn't matter about the intent. If the insult happens,
no, I don't think you can say that.
Why can't we just be adults?
And what's so wrong with insulting people? There's no right not to be offended, surely, in a free society.
But in the workplace, that's not exactly.
I think. Let me just say, I think that it's really important. What you've just said there is that the intent is the most important thing. If you're having a bit of a joke with someone,
I absolutely disagree.
No, but if you're having a well-intentioned joke with someone and your intent is to actually just have a little bit of playful banter, if your intent is actually to say, you know what, I want to actually bond with you, and the way we're going to do this is to take the mickey out of each other a little bit, that's a very different intent to actually intending to hurt someone's feelings. You must see a distinction there.
But it's about who. It's a case of appropriateness. I don't necessarily think that is okay in the workplace. There might be friends who I know long enough to understand that's how we interact. But when particularly when there are positions of power at stake, a power imbalance, that's never going to be okay, because there are consequences to criticizing or complaining about the person who's doing the insulting.
What are these consequences? That's ridiculous. I mean, people are adults, aren't they? And they can give it back if they don't like what's being
but also,
said to them.
You know, this isn't a dinner party, particularly workplaces. You don't want to be sitting there kind of volleying jibes back and forth like you're in the West Wing.
But in fairness, that's my ideal work environment. But Marc, hasn't Kate got a point?
If we could all be as witty as that, it would be marvellous. But let's face it, we can't.
Thankfully, I am. But Marc, hasn't Kate got a point in as much as she says that there may be a power imbalance, and if someone is in authority doing this to someone more junior, that might make someone feel uncomfortable in a way that at a dinner party it wouldn't.
Well, of course there's a power imbalance, but there's nothing wrong in that. I mean, there's a power imbalance between me and people who are higher up the food chain here at the Institute of Economic Affairs. I don't have a right to be treated in some particular way by them. If I don't like it, I can always leave. People should,
but that's not,
person up, individual up, and engage in free and open conversations with their employers and co-workers. And if they really can't stand the environment they're in a free market economy, they can always leave and find a job elsewhere. If
there you go, Kate.
Then
you can do that. So there you go, Kate. They could always leave. They could always leave. If they don't like the culture in that workplace where there's banter flying around the office, they could always leave.
A, why should they have to? B, of course, it's not that easy to just get another job, particularly right now. But okay, Marc, have you never had somebody say something insulting to you and taken that personally and felt uncomfortable by it?
Yeah, but that's tough. That's my problem. I don't want to restrict.
Okay, but don't you think there should be places where that's not appropriate?
People could say, look, Kate, you can say whatever you like to me about me, my family, my football club. It really doesn't bother me. You have a right to say whatever you want to say to me in any context, including this one. I don't have a right to dictate to you what you can say to me. And if I don't like it, I can walk off the show. I can have some snowflake type meltdown. That would be my problem, not yours. You have a right to say whatever you want to say.
Aren't you respectfully oversimplifying this a little bit? I mean, I look back at my career when I was starting out, and I had a boss, and he used to, and it went past banter, and it actually used to be the only time I've ever really got upset at work was when someone who it was clear the boss didn't like me and they didn't have a great intent in what they were saying. That's why I'm returning back to this word intent. Now, that would put someone in a really difficult position because I can either stay there and have a horrible time at work or I can leave and be unemployed. Neither is a particularly great outcome, and that's a position that I'm in through no fault of my own. So is it as simple, really, as you're making out?
Yeah, absolutely, because those aren't the choices. You can leave and find another job, and that's what millions of us do.
You make out that involves sort of skipping down and walking into your next dream job.
And also, why should your company lose a potentially valuable, fantastic worker because one of their other employees can't keep their match?
Okay, well, Marc, you answer both of those points.
Yeah, look, in a privately owned economy, it seems to me that the relationship between employees and the management of those institutions should be an entirely private affair, and in some cases subject to actual contracts of employment. And if you feel that your contract of employment has been broken in some way, then of course you have legal redress, civil redress. That's fair and fine. I've been in situations where I didn't have a contract and I've walked out of some jobs because I didn't particularly enjoy or like the particular subculture of those establishments. But that was my problem, not theirs. They have a right to conduct their affairs as they see fit.
And on the flip side to what I've just said, Kate, when I actually finally stood up to that boss and it wasn't, and I actually sort of gave it back to him, I learned a hell of a lot, and it absolutely toughened me up, and it absolutely prepared
But why
me.
should you have had to go through that experience of being belittled and being upset at work.
Because I'll tell you why I had to go through it, because that is life. I'm going to be upset in life. There are going to be countless other times I may potentially be upset at work, and you know what? I don't really get upset at work anymore, because I learned something from that.
They shouldn't criticise personal things about you at work. That's ridiculous.
Why not? Oh my God, what do you want to live in a permanent sort of playgroup, a safe space in which? How are you going to police this, Kate? Are you going to have some Stasi-like state where we're all being monitored 24 hours a day? And what are the criteria going to be as to what people can say to each other and cannot say to each other?
Well,
this
do you
is
know
a
what?
recipe
Just
for a totalitarian state.
Hold on, both of you, because we're going to let you say a lot more to each other. We have to take a quick break for the news headlines where we cool it down for a second. But Kate, I'll let you respond to what Marc has just said, and we'll have more of what you've got to say about this coming up right here on Talk Radio. Kate, Marc just put to you the idea that of how we would ever police this. You know, I think you used the expression Stasi-like when it came to how we would police what is right or wrong in the workplace, whether teasing is appropriate or not. When you give this answer, can I just read you something as well which might influence this? And it's from a lady called Jane, who sent me a tweet saying, "One reason I left the police after 27 years was we weren't allowed to have banter with each other. It turns out if anyone else heard the banter, they didn't like it, they could complain on the person's behalf. They just needed to overhear it to be offended." What do you make of that?
I mean, I would question what she was saying that required a complaint. It's perfectly possible to have friendly, jokey banter with colleagues that doesn't involve, insulting people or actual abuse or things people would find offensive. And of course, we already have a situation where inappropriate conduct in the workplace is, quote unquote, policed, not by some faceless Stasi leftist bureaucrat, but by a company's HR department, as well they should be. When I'm working, obviously there's a huge amount of criticism I'm prepared to accept for my work. My editors can come back to me with feedback or criticism of what I'm writing, of how I'm arguing. But what they can't do is, for example, you need to rewrite that, you stupid dyke or something, because that's a whole personal thing for me that's not related to my work. That doesn't get to be insulted. And of course, we're talking about this being Talk Radio TV. But I know exactly what's going to happen over the next week, which is that I'm going to get a slow but steady trickle of emails from people who've seen this and want to tell me how ugly I am, want to tell me how painfully woke.
But haven't you just raised? I think you've raised a really good point there, because there is a line, and Marc, yes, I'll get to hear what you say about that, because I think what you've just described is just someone being insulting. That's not teasing, to call someone a stupid.
They could say that and laugh, and then how do I come back to that? And then, oh no, but I'm only joking. I didn't mean any harm by it. Well, I'm still insulted. I still have had, my personal life and my character brought into a conversation where that's not relevant.
Isn't there a good point about the line of one person's teasing is another person's insult, and we need to be.
But why should the person doing the quote unquote teasing be the one to get to decide that line, as opposed to the person who is responding?
Because it's called a free society, and if you want to live in a free society as opposed to a totalitarian
that doesn't mean freedom from
state,
consequence.
then you have to accept that people are going to say things you don't like.
Let him finish, Kate.
I mean, it's go figure. You either live in a free society or you live in an authoritarian, illiberal society, which it seems to me is what
we don't want to live in a cruel society. We're talking about banter, teasing based on, done with good intentions, done with love, done because you want to bond with someone. I don't want to live in a cruel society. I'm sure you don't want to live in a cruel society.
And the thing is, people take advantage of that.
Can I come back?
Yeah,
it's
let
not
Marc
for
finish.
me or Kate or you or anybody else to dictate the nature of the culture. The culture is made up of millions of people who interact spontaneously through the economy, through conversations they have with each other, through all kinds of activities. And some of those interactions will be unpleasant for some individuals, depending on their own sensitivities. You know, if a Brentford football fan wants to bait me as a QPR supporter because we're now in different divisions, that's fine. But other people, hypersensitive QPR fans, might have some.
But what about your age? What about your
appearance? That is their
appearance?
problem. It's not the problem of the people doing the teasing
But
or being insulting. If you don't want to be somebody around somebody who insults you, then move away or give it
Then
back.
why doesn't the person doing the insulting move? Seriously,
Sorry?
if you cannot be polite and respectful of other people, why on earth should anybody want to work with you or hire you? Why should they be the people who are leaving?
I think you've made a very good point. So if you find that in the particular circumstances you find yourself in socially or professionally, that your conduct is not to the liking of other people, even if you think you're just engaging in, you know, light-hearted, well-meaning banter, then in fact you will find yourself being asked to leave, and that's fair enough. And then you can go and either amend your own behaviour. But it seems to me that what Kate is implicitly wanting is some sort of central agency to dictate all the conversations that take place.
In fairness to Kate, she addressed that as HR. But Mark, can I just say that you must surely acknowledge, though, that there is a line. Fine, it might have been the same place as where you put it as Kate, but surely if you are vindictively being insulting towards someone's race or sexual orientation, then that is something that's very different to what we're discussing.
It's not something I would wish to engage in as a liberal individualist, because I couldn't care less what sort of.
But the person who is making those comments would be in the wrong. People in a free society must have the right to insult each other, and on whatever basis they so choose. And you can't then have
why should that happen in a workplace? Why is that okay?
What we should say. There's no right not to be offended in a free society.
To even hate speech,
even being racist.
So I should be able, Mark, to be racist to someone at work.
Well, of course, yes, that's called.
What? Then they should leave and go. But they hang on. But then they should leave. They should leave and then go and get another job if I am, because that was your argument a second ago.
A matter which would be determined by the company, that the two individuals who are having some sort of interaction, one of whom says they think that they have been in some way addressed in a racist factor. That can be then determined by the people who own the company. As Kate said, the HR department can be involved, and then they can reach their own determination. Unless you're talking about some extraordinary, omnipresent, totalitarian agency monitoring every conversation in every workplace, in every private household.
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking about teasing. If we're going to start sort of trying to excuse, racism or outright vindictive sexism, that's where you've kind of lost me a little bit, because I'm talking about well-intentioned teasing based on love. As a way I bond with people, I tease people to bond with them. They tease me back, and I love that part of British culture. Kate, what really offends you then? What would be something that you would hear that would really offend you?
I mean,
apart from what you've just heard now, I presume.
Yeah. In terms of something that would offend, me personally as Kate, as I said, it's what I know is going to happen if I foolishly check the comments on my Twitter account after this. It's going to be stuff about my sexuality, about my weight, about my appearance, none of which is important or relevant. And on a wider level, actually, I don't want to work somewhere where, casual racism cloaked in alleged humour passes for conversation.
But aren't you conflating? Aren't you confusing? As I said before, banter and actual outright vindictive insults.
Well, where is the line, and who gets to
decide? But you can tell the line.
Quite, that's a very good question.
It's still insulting.
That's a really good question, Kate. Who gets to decide?
You. Gosh. I think what we need to be looking at here is who is using this excuse of banter as an excuse to be insulting and to say all the things that they mean, but they may just be laughing about.
All right, final word from you both.
So it's harder to turn it away.
Final word, Marc.
Well, you know, when I was at school, there was a chant in the playground along the lines of "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." It seems to me that children in a bygone age were made of tougher stuff. They were more grown up than a lot of adults are today. Middle-class people who are kind of permanently infantilized, want to live in a therapeutic society where they're protected from hearing all kinds of things. A free society is not a safe space. It's not a safe place. You get to see things you don't like, you get to hear things you don't like, and you know what? You just have to deal with it, so long as it's not actually physically aggressive. And free speech is a really valuable thing. We may not always like what other people say, but we must respect at the end of the day their right to say it.
All right, listen, really good to speak to you both. I'm not sure you'll agree on it. Kate Welch, journalist and broadcaster, Marc Glendening from the Institute of Economic Affairs. So where do you stand on this? And, you know, it is a fair point to say one person's banter is another person's insult, but are we not intelligent enough to perhaps know the difference? I don't endorse a society where you can go around and be horribly insulting and toxic and vile to each other with a bad intention, but I do endorse a society where we can mickey take. I do endorse a society where we can banter. I do endorse a society where we can, based on love, tease each other. And I really, really cherish that about being British. I cherish that about my friends and people that I'm close to, and my colleagues as well. And I just wonder whether that's something we're losing a little of. We'll find out what you've got to say about that coming up right here on Talk Radio.